3D for the web has always been a challenge, and usually you need to use complex tools like ThreeJS, React Fiber to achieve good results. But what if you could create an amazing 3D experience without touching a single line of code? Guess what? That's now possible with the latest Spline and Webflow integration. In this two-part tutorial, I'll show you how to create a Spline scene ready to be animated in Webflow, and then I'll show you how to use Webflow interactions to make the same scene animated, dynamic, interactive, using things like mouse movement, scroll-based interactions, etc. Are you excited? I am. So let's check it out. Okay, so this is the cloneable that I created to demonstrate what's possible with Spline and Webflow now. And it's already available. You can clone this project, you can clone the Spline scene as well, and see how I created all of this. And it's very cool. Like, this is like a Webflow website, obviously. And we have this fake project that I created, this fake product. And like, it's like soda cans. And you can see that as I move my mouse, the 3D can is like animated, so it's rotating, etc. And once I start scrolling, the cans are rotating on their individual axes, and then also like rotating on the screen, just like a slider. So it's a scroll-based interaction. So we have like multiple interactions happening at the same time, and all of these interactions are done with Webflow interactions. There's no Spline interactions here. You could create interactions on Spline, but for this tutorial, we're only going to use interactions in Webflow. Okay? So first things first, what is a Spline? Well, there's tons of 3D softwares out there. For Blender, for example, Blender is my tool of choice for any 3D design work that I had to do. But Spline is really good because it's a browser-based 3D software, which means that it's built with web technologies like WebGL, etc. And it's made for the web, meaning that its main purpose is to create interactive 3D experiences for the web. You can use Spline for other things, like you can create images, you can create videos. For example, you want to create a mock-up to show a project. You can't do that with Spline. Spline has enough capabilities to create like a satisfactory scene with some realistic textures, etc. But I think what makes Spline shine is creating interactive scenes. Like they have like logic, they have like event-based interaction, etc. So it can do a lot of stuff with Spline. And one of the good things about Spline as well, it's simplified workflow. If you use Blender or other software tools like me before, you know that like the user interface can get pretty messy, and because they are very comprehensive. Like Blender, for example, you can use Blender for multiple things. You can use to create like scenes for the web, but at the same time you can do like motion graphics. You can even do 2D videos with Blender. Like it's a crazy tool you can use for tons of things, right? But Spline's more focused on creating stuff for the web, and its user interface is more simplified, meaning that it's close to Figma, let's say, in some of its aspects, like how do you manage materials and the layers and grouping, etc. So it's a lot easier to use, in my opinion. But there are always pros and cons of using these tools for the web. Like Spline is no exception. And well, the pros is obviously it's easy to set up a scene, add interactions, create states with Spline. It's very easy. You don't have to touch a single line of code to do that with Spline. That's fantastic. And there's, well, obviously the biggest advantage for me right now is that there's a native Webflow integration that allows you to like use Webflow interactions to like move things on the 3D scene. So this is amazing, and you don't have to touch a single line of code now to create great stuff. But everything comes with cost, right? And I think the main cost of using Spline right now is regarding performance. Spline scenes can run like pretty smooth on desktop devices from my experience, but it's really hard to control performance for mobile. Like most of the time the scenes like they have an okay performance, but you can perceive some glitchy behavior, especially with scroll-based interactions. So like if you use things like ThreeJS, if you have a custom coded your 3D scene, you have more granular control over how your scene is rendered, and so you have more control over performance. There's specific stuff you can do with ThreeJS to make your scene like run a little bit smoother on mobile, but you don't have that amount of control with Spline. And one of the other things is that, well, with ThreeJS you can like go crazy and create like crazy shaders that have like crazy effects, but you can't do the same thing with Spline. Spline allows you to create like complex materials, but like things like custom shaders that react to variables on the screen, like there's crazy stuff out there. You can take a look, but the things you can do with shaders and materials with Spline is limited, a little bit limited, and like there's a reason for that. Okay, so let's get started. So the goal of this video is to create the Spline, to show you how I created this Spline scene I use for that clonable, and show you how to do things like model the object, creating the material, setting up the scene, etc. So we're gonna follow these steps here. So first, I'm gonna briefly show you the user interface. Then we're going to model a can, the soda can. Then I'm going to show you how to use SVGs to make your life easier when it comes down to modeling stuff. Then I'm going to show you how to set up the material for the can. And finally, I'm going to show you how to use groups and how to set up your camera to make your scene ready for Webflow. Okay, so let's get to it. Okay, so this is Spline. It's running on the browser, so it's really great, and you can see that the user interface, it's not that complex, and it looks similar to Figma, let's say. So you have like a left bar, which is basically showing you your the structure of your file. Okay, there's a couple other things here, like the ability to import things. But we'll keep things simple today, so we're mainly focused on the file structure. Then we have the top bar, which gives you the ability to like add stuff on the scene, like creating objects, selecting things, and then there's these two things. This button runs play your Spline scene. So if you have like interactive stuff on your Spline scene, you can play and test it by clicking on this button. And then there's the export button that we need to use that to export stuff from Spline, being like a video, an image, or even the Spline scene itself to import into Webflow. So we use the export button as well. Okay, and then the right sidebar has tons of stuff, but it's simple actually. So we have like the viewport. That's where you select the camera. You can have multiple cameras on your scene. So you have the viewport camera, and then we have another camera that I created here. You can add multiple cameras. Then there's some settings for your scene. For example, you can choose what is the size of your frame. Most of the time for the web, we want to keep it responsive. Then there's some scene setup. For example, if you want to make the background transparent or add a color to the background. There's other stuff like how the light is behaving, simulations if you have physics, effects. This is pretty cool, but we're not going to use this today. I'm going to explain why. Fog effect. So all of these things is to make your scene a little bit more realistic if you want, but we don't need all of that for the tutorial today. Ambient shadows to make the shadows look a little bit better. And other settings. Then you can see here we can have variables. Spline recently launched variables. Materials, so these are all the materials that I created, and you can create materials and reuse those materials. And then image assets, color assets, all the assets you use on your file, you will be able to see it here. Okay, so this is how the right sidebar looks without anything clicked. But if you select something like this can, you will see other stuff. So for example, states and events, that's how you create interactivity on your Spline file. We don't need these things for the tutorial because we're going to use interactions on Webflow. We just need the objects, okay? And then we can see here that we have like fields for position, scale, rotation, all these 3 axes because 3D, right? Snap settings, the shape. So depending on what you're selecting, you will see different properties here to be changed. So since this is a custom mesh, the only thing I can see is I can only define the size or click here to edit the mesh. The subdivision modifier is like if you have a low resolution mesh, you can make it look a little bit better and smoother by increasing the subdivision level. Be careful with this. Then we have the material. That's where we set up the material for the can and other stuff like visibility, shadows, etc., etc. Okay. And the materials itself, it looks similar to Figma in a way because the way Spline handles materials is with layers. So it can create layers of things and blend things together to create materials. So for example, here I'm using 3 different layers to create this, and it's similar to Figma where you can like have like for an object you can have a layer of color, then another layer with an image, and then another layer with gradients, etc. And you can blend all those things together. Okay, we're gonna look at this later. All right, and you can see that my scene looks weird, like all the cans are like with this position, and there's a reason for that because the way we have the effect on the website, if you look at here, you start scrolling and things are rotating, right? So the way we set up the scene is basically we have all the 4 cans on their positions and they're all rotating on like 90 degrees because we have 4. If we had 5, the angle should be different, okay? And it's like that because in Webflow, instead of rotating the cans individually, we're only going to rotate one object, which is the cans group. So the way you plan your scene is like if you have different interactions like we have on the demo, it's usually better to group things and use the groups to manipulate and make the interactions. Okay. So on the example, when we start scrolling the scene, the only thing that rotates here for like showing different cans is the cans group. So we're only rotating this. Then we have other groups like, for example, this one here. We have the wrapper here. This group is responsible for the mouse movement rotation. And then inside of that, we also have another group. And this is responsible for when you start scrolling, the cans are also rotating on their own axis here. Okay, so we have 3 different interactions here in Webflow. That's why we have three different levels of groups. So we have this one, the global one, then we have the individual one for mouse movement, and this one for moving the can on its own axis. And then the other things here is just to group other things together. So we have different elements on the can. Let's take a look. So we have here the can itself, and then you can see that the top, this line here inside on top of the can, and the open. This is one object. It's an SVG object actually. Then we have the other, which is the can tab. This is also an SVG object. And then we have the can itself. So all of these things are grouped together, and then we create all the other groups to create interactions. Okay. So that's that, and then all these cans are like this, and then we have our scene camera. So you can use a personal camera, but I prefer to use the personal camera just like to drag things around and navigate through my scene. And then I have set up the camera specifically to, like, this is the view that is going to be used on the website. So always use a camera, set up specific camera to be the final point of view for your scene. So that's what we have here. Okay. So yeah, that's basically how the scene is set up. So how do we model this can and how do we prepare the scene? So let's see if I can reproduce this, okay? First thing we want to do is create the can itself, okay? So I have here a new spline scene, so let's just delete all this stuff here, get all this stuff out of our way. Then let me make the background transparent by removing the color opacity here. And let me enable ambient shadows to make sure that the shadows look a little bit better. And well, the can is pretty simple. It's just a cylinder. So we start with a cylinder, and then we use a few properties to model the rest of the cylinder, which is pretty easy. Okay. So let's start with a is it a cylinder? So let's draw the cylinder right here. I think it was something like this, right? Yeah, something like this is fine. So if I start rotating, yes, we don't have any lights here. Okay, so it's a little bit dark. Let me just change the color a bit to make it easier to see the object. Okay, so this is our can, and if you will click on this cylinder, like I said, depending on what you're selecting, you can see different properties here. So for the cylinder shape, we have tons of different things here. We have the size, we have the top and the bottom, so you can manipulate the shape and create things like that. You don't want to do that. How many sides? So like 3. Let's reduce this for performance purposes. Let's reduce the amount of size. Let's say 16. 16 is fine. Okay. The angle is fine. We don't want to change the angle. Caps means like it's closed here at the top and at the bottom. It's not open. Corner, we don't want a corner right now. So let's remove corners. We want this to be flat on the corners because we're going to customize this. And yeah, I think that's it. Now, how do you model this into the can? It's not just a single cylinder, right? We have like these like the scenes here, these borders here at the top and at the bottom of the cans, right? So how do we model this? So on Spline, like you can create these shapes. And then if you click here, smooth and edit, whatever you have here set up will be applied to these modifiers. These are all modifiers to modify the shape. All these things will be applied. So if you have like smooth corners, you will see the geometry for smooth corners, etc. That's why we removed that. We don't want that right now. So we can click here, smooth and edit. And keep here the subdivision level at 0, because if you increase this, you see how things will be smooth, right? And we don't want a can that looks like this. Now, well, when you are editing a shape, so we have a few options here. You can select faces, edges, and individual vertices. And you can also extrude, you can inset, you can create loop cuts, and we can slide some edges. So we don't want this to look like this when we smooth things a little bit. So what I'm gonna do is, let's take all the shapes right here, all the faces. Let's see, okay. And then let's move back to this view here, and I want to start making the borders of the cans. So let's extrude this a little bit. So if you click here on extrude, you see that there's this button, this dot here. If you click here, it will start creating new edges, new faces here. Okay. So we created this. Now we want, and let's keep one of the loops here, because this extra edge that we have here will make sure that when we start applying the subdivision, it won't get rounded like this. Okay, so let's keep this right here. Now let's extrude one more time. Okay, so we have this extra extrusion here. So we want to start, we want to scale this down a little bit. So we click on this dot and we drag our mouse a little bit. And then we have this part of the can. Now I want to create a border. So again, we're going to extrude here one more time. Right. Now let's use inset. And do a little bit like this. If you start moving here, you will see that it will create like faces inside the current selected faces. Okay. So let's do like this. And now let's go back to this view. And then let's click here, extrude again, but let's extrude to the bottom. Okay. And then we have our can border. And now if we go back to this view and if we add one level of subdivision, we'll see that we still have our can border right here. All right, so let's do the same at the bottom. Let me select all these again, make sure that nothing is correctly selected. So let's do it again. So extrude for the extra look cut, extrude one more time, scale down, extrude again. Now that we have this, let's look it down and let's click inset and let's move this slightly so we create the border. Great. Let's move again to the front view, select extrude again one more time, and then extrude. Come on. Extrude inside. I don't think we want to extrude like that. So let's do one slightly border like this, and then we want to inset again one more time, and we want to move this to the top a little bit. So at the bottom of the can is a little bit more rounded. So yeah, we do the same thing with this individual vertice, and that's it. We have our can. So we can increase now the subdivision level so it looks slightly better, and that's it. We can click here to close the modeling tool, and starting to look like a can. Okay, I think this can is a little bit taller than this one. Let me just adjust this. We can select all these shapes and we can move this down a little bit. Okay, looks good. All right, and this looks ugly and boring, right? So let's start working a little bit with materials before we add the top of the can. And the way we set up materials, like I said, is with layers. And there's a few strategies you can use for materials and lining. And one of the biggest tips I can give you today is about using matte caps. So what is a matte cap? Matte cap is a type of texture. You can use textures here, but it's a type of texture that contains information about the two things that makes things look more realistic: reflections and light. So basically, you have a texture that simulates the light and the reflections on your object without using a single light. You can use multiple lights here on Spline, but one of the tips I have is the more lights you include, the slower and more expansive your scene will look like. And that's because the browser and any other software tool, when you create a light point, it needs to calculate all the light rates, like bouncing around all your scene, like reflecting and going inside things like glass, etc. So there's a lot of calculation it needs to do. And with matte caps, you don't have to use lights because lights are already baked into the texture. So I'm going to show you how to do that. First, obviously, you need a matte cap texture. And where to find that? There's tons of 3D texture websites out there. One of these is Polygon. This is a pretty good one. There's paid textures here, but I'm using a free texture. And you can look at this and see this is like the matte cap. This is how the matte cap looks like. It's like it's sphere, and you can see that there are reflections, there are some textures here, there are lights. So all of this information inside the circle will be transferred to the object when we apply the matte cap. And since we're here, I'm going to also show you the Figma file. So this is the Figma file where I handle all the textures for the scene. So we have here all the labels for the cans, right? I created these textures using Midjourney, and then I just created this on Figma. So pretty simple stuff. These are the SVG objects I'm gonna show you in a minute. And then this is the matte cap that I use for the metal texture for the can, right? So I basically included that same texture inside a rectangle, and I made sure that rectangle has a white background. So the background you can see here also affects how the light is behaving inside the matte cap texture. Okay, so I basically just exported this texture, and then let's create that texture here. Okay, let's see. So first thing, we have a color. We all need a color. So if you click here, you will see all the options you have for materials on Spline. You can add images, videos. You can have like depth. Depth is really fun to play with. Normals, gradients, and other stuff. Even glass. But we want to select the matte cap. And when you select matte cap, you can see that it's already having some interesting stuff here. If you click here on this icon, you will see different options for matte caps. And yes, there's some stuff baked in already on Spline you can use for reflections. So this looks really cool, right? And this is basically just one texture. It's just one image. And if you start rotating the scene, you can see how the reflections behave on the object. It's like having a light on your scene, but you don't have a light. It's all baked on the texture, right? So let's go back here and select our matte cap. So let me click here. We need to create a new one. Let's name this aluminum. And now if I click here and replace image, let's go to my project. And try here. So I just need to select this, and you can see how it looks great already, right? Isn't this looking great? Yeah, it does look like a realistic soda can, right? Without the label. Okay, so, but that's not all, right? There's still the label, and there's also some metal reflection. See, as I start dragging things around, there's some reflection on top of the label, right? And it's pretty easy. We're going to create this. We just need 3 layers. You can disable the lighting layer is like required, but you don't need that. So let's disable the lighting layer. Now let's create another layer. Let's move it down. Let's add an image. Okay. So sometimes when you model a custom shape here, or custom mesh like this, you will see this this wording here. This object might benefit from a better texture projection. It's because you have like a flat image as the texture. It's going to be applied on a mesh that has different angles, etc. So it's always good to click here and improve, and you can see that the texture is already looking different, right? This is before, so you couldn't see anything. Now clicking on improve, now your model has like a UV. UV is like a 3D term for it's how you unwrap the whole geometry into something without being 3D. It's like a just a flat thing with all the sides, all the faces on a texture. So that's how you apply another texture on top of the 3D object. So Spline does that for you automatically. Okay, so we have our image. If I click here on image, again we need to add another image here, asset. So let's click here and call this berry blades. And if I click here I can load my Berry Blaze soda label, and yeah, it looks weird, right? So what we need to do is play with the settings to make sure that the texture is only apply like once and is not repeating and it's on the right position. So let's play with the numbers here. We want a cylindrical. Let's try here. Height. Oh no. Like this, I think. Want this to crop. I want to scale it down a little bit. And need to reverse this. So yeah, there's no like magic formula here. Most of the time you need to play with the numbers. So -1 measure the texture. Let's make this a little bit bigger, and let's use the offset to move this down a little bit. And that's it. So we have our texture apply here. Now we have the label. Okay. The next thing is to add a reflection because it's flat, right? There's no reflection on top of this texture. So what we're going to do is create another layer of matte cap because our matte cap already has all the reflection information that we need. Okay. So let's create again another matte cap. Let's select our aluminum texture. And obviously it's on top of the label, so we're not seeing anything. So what we need to do is to blend the matte cap line information with the texture below. And this icon here gives you some blend modes. It's not like Figma or Photoshop. There's not tons of options. So we just have multiply, screen, and overlay. So this is how multiply looks like. So the darker areas are more visible. Screen makes all the light areas more visible, and for this type of reflection we're looking for, overlay it's probably better, but it's too strong, right? What we need to do here is basically just decrease the level of opacity of this layer. So let's do like 50%, maybe 30%. Yeah, let's see, and this is perfect. So our material for the silicon is done. Now, what's next? Well, basically, we can't open our soda can because, well, where's the open? Where's the tab? Right? That's where we start working with SVGs. And yeah, it's like whenever you have some complex shapes, you can model these shapes here on Spline, but like it might take a little bit of time. So depending on the shape you need, like creating an SVG and importing here and using the SVG to create a 3D object, it's totally fine. And we're going to do that. So if you see here, this is like the top of the can that I model. So this is the can. This is one of the things at the top. And then we have the tab. So I split this into two SVG layers, the tab and the top with the open. All right. And export it. So let's import this right here. So I can click here, import, vector, and let's start with the can. It's called can open here, but it's the can tab. And okay, we have our can tab. Looks gorgeous, right? Except it's not. So first, the material looks ugly, and second, if we start rotating here, it's flat. So how do we fix that? First thing is, you see here that we have a group for the SVG, and then we have the shape. If you select the shape, have a few options here for the shape itself, like subdivision, corner, and extrusion. So extrusion is what we're looking for, but before we mess up with this, let's add the material so we can see what's going on. So we want to apply the same material that we had here. So let's create a reusable material because we're going to apply this for the other SVG as well. And basically our material is just the matte cap. We're using the aluminum texture. Okay, and that's it. So you can save your materials on your library. So if I click here, to create like a material, let's call it minion again. And you can reuse the same material instead of recreating from scratch. All right, so we have our SVG or flat SVG with the texture. Now we can go back to the shape and start playing with extrusion. So yeah, extruding the shape, we'll make it look like this. I think this is good enough for the tab. And then let's add some bevel. Okay, let's make it rounded like this. And yeah, looks perfect. Bevel sides. Yeah, great. So we have here great reflections and lighting with the SVG object. So it was really easy to add here. Now we just need to position this at the top. So let's move it here. Let's scale it down a little bit. If I just do this, it will scale only one axis. So I need to hold shift and scale it down like this. So it's proportional. Let's move it here again. Now let's see the top view. And clicking on this line will rotate things. Let's rotate 90 degrees. And rotate again 90 degrees. And now we can move this right here for now. And here. Let's see. Yeah. This is perfect. Okay, next thing. The open, right? And that border that we have. So let's import this and top. So it's looking weird because this was like just a shape without fill, and like sometimes it comes right like this. So what I'm going to do is convert this to a path. Now, instead of like making the SVG like fill it in, it's just like lines, and we can reduce the path extrusion a little bit. So instead of 15, let's make it like, I don't know, 225. 25 is fine. And let's take this individual shape here and let's extrude this as well. 25. Yeah, this is great. Let's move it here. Let's take a look here. And yeah, it looks great. So let's take the can top and let's apply the material that we created. Great. This doesn't need an extra extrusion here because this is like the top of the can, the open of the can, right? All right, so let's shrink this down a little bit. Let's move it down. Rotate again. Here, let's move it in the middle. Okay, let's move it here. And then right here. Let's take a look how it's looking like right now. Still need to be a little bit more here at the top. And yeah, I just realized that the position of the open is not correct, but we can fix that. Let's just move this here. And let's scale this up a little bit. Okay, almost there. Right. Let's just move a little bit more. Let me adjust this a little bit. Okay, I think this can go a little bit like this. And now our can tab. Let me just rename this. Can tab. Let's move it slightly to here. And that's it. So we have or soda can. It's done. Our first soda can. Now all we have to do is select all of these shapes. Let's select here, and let's group it. Ctrl G or Command G, group things. Now this is the berry blaze can. Alright. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to transform the scene into this. And it's actually very simple, right? So let's first create the group for the individual rotation. So Ctrl G again. So berry blaze rotation, just arbitrary names, and another group, Ctrl G, to rotate the can, and this group will be like moving around. And then let's rotate this a little bit like this, and like this. Please. Okay. So we'll have here, or can have here the group that will rotate like individually. We have this group just to create like the position that we see here, and then we have the one that will be responsible for moving things around. Okay, so we have all these groups. Now I can simply click Ctrl D to duplicate. So we'll have another one. Let's call this the zesty handle. That's the second second flavor. Let's duplicate again and again. Okay. Right. So let's change the labels. Right. So all I have to do is to click on my cylinder here. Click here, add another image. Okay, so we have our 4 cans, and now it's time to position these things. And what I'm going to do to make this easier, it's obviously I'm going to create a circle. Okay, let's scale the circle a little bit. And all right. So I have the circle to position things. We don't have to add any materials because we're going to hide the circle later. And let's move everything inside here. Now let's select everything and group. So basically what we're going to do is pick one of the cans and position them properly. So this one, let's select the berry blaze one and the circle. And when you have 2 items selected, you have alignment options. So for X, I want to align in the middle, and for Y, or is for Z? For Y, I want to add on max, is the top. Next one, Zest is in handle. We want to align on the max for X and Y in the middle. For Tropical Thrill, want to align this in the middle and then at the bottom, and then the last one, Citrus Crush. This will be minimal, and then center. So all the cans are positioned on the right places. Now we just need to rotate the cans. So let's take the Zest is Infantile. So we have rotation options here. So 90 degrees, 180, and finally 270. Oops, actually, this is not correct. Let's see, minus. Yes, yes. And this one's not, is also not properly rotated, so it's minus 19. Now, all of the objects are at the right places. And you can call this whatever you want, rotate, group, whatever. We can hide this now because we already have our group with the right size and the right position, so everything is properly set up. The only thing missing now is setting up the camera. So let's add a new camera here. And now we have our camera selected here on the viewport, and we can now align things properly. So rotate group, let's make this to be right in the middle of everything. So position is all 0. And now the camera is right here. Let's move it. It's an orthographic camera, right? So it doesn't work the same as perspective. We want a perspective camera. Now we can start moving the z-axis to go like backwards, and the y-axis to focus on our first scan. Let's move again the z-axis here. And yeah, there you go. So that's the view I'm going to see when we import this into Webflow. So we have our camera. Let's lock our camera, and that's it. This is your scene. So we can rotate things around, and we don't want to have this enabled. So how we prepare our scene and export it to make it work the way we want on Webflow. So we don't want any panning, any zooming, any orb controls, nothing. We want this to be static, and Webflow will control all the directions. So then we click export, and then this is where you can see all the options you have to export this. You can export as a public URL, so it can just work inside an iframe. Spline Viewer, which is basically what Webflow uses to integrate with Spline. You can export a code component to use it with React, ThreeJS, etc. You can export images, videos. You can export into other 3D formats like a GLTF and etc. and other options as well. Okay, but we want first to look at play settings. So main scene, yeah, you can have multiple scenes on Spline, but yeah, we need one for this. The camera is the camera that we created. We don't want a Spline logo. Obviously, if you have a free account, the logo it will always be there. You need a paid account to remove the logo. We don't want a background color. We want this to be transparent. We want the Spline scene to allow page scrolling. If you disable this, when you have a mouse over Spline scene, the scrolling won't work. We want to display the cursor. You can hide the cursor if you want, but we don't want that. And here we want to disable all these controls. We don't want orbit controls. We don't want a panning, any zooming, some orbit, and nothing like that. Touch settings, you can just leave it like this. There's other options here and over, etc. We don't need to mess with any of these. No events, because we don't have any events here on the scene. Materials, glass precision, like height, obviously make glass look better, but we want to optimize this for performance, so let's keep it normal. And then compression, this is important. So you can have different options here. You can have the default one. You can have the one that ensures quality is better, and you have one that ensures the performance is better. So performance, let's select performance. Preload, yes, if possible, and that's it. So we updated our scene settings. Okay, and if we go here and click play, now I can rotate, I can pin, so scene is ready to go. And once we're ready to import this into Webflow, it's easy. We just need to click here in Viewer, and you will need to copy the URL that's right here, that's generating right now. Yeah, this one. All I have to do is copy this, and then we'll paste into Webflow. But this will come on the next tutorial. Alright, so that's it. That's how you create a model on Spline, add materials, set up your scene, etc., and make it ready for Webflow. So a quick recap on things to keep in mind is, first, avoid complex geometry. So we want this to work as smoothly as possible for the web, which means that your scene needs to be lightweight, especially if you want to use 3D on mobile as well. So avoid complex geometries. You can model things on other softwares and import here, but or you can model on Spline, but always try to keep your geometries as simple as possible. Like the more faces, vertices you have, the worse, because like the browser will need to calculate all of this and to be able to render your 3D scene. So the more calculations, the more expensive your scene is, the slower it gets, okay? Then using groups to split your interactions, this is something that I used on Webflow itself. It's not like specific for Spline, but yeah, like you see, like you saw on the tutorial, you can have multiple layers of groups, and then when you import into Webflow, you can select specific groups to add interactions. So planning your interactions for the 3D scene. After you do that, then you can think about how you group things together, but it's really useful. And last, but the most important, in my opinion, is matcaps are your friends. Matcaps are great, specifically because they allow you to have good looking lining and reflections without any lights. We don't have any lights in our scenes, but it looks great, right? And the less lights you have, the better. If you add more lights to your scene, yes, it will work, but performance will probably be worse because, like I said, every light needs to cast multiple light rays on all your objects on the scene, and that means that like there's tons of calculations your browser has to do, and specifically for mobile, this will like get ugly really fast. Okay, that's it. Thanks for watching. I hope this video is useful. Part 2 is coming soon, and part 2 we're going to grab the scene and import into Webflow, and then we're going to create interactions for the 3D scene inside Webflow. Okay, thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications because the part 2 is coming soon. Okay, thanks.